We're going to talk to you a little bit about communication. Communication is a very powerful skill, and it comes naturally to some people, but to a lot of us, it takes a lot of hard work. Development of communication skills, for many people, we have worked very hard at trying to be better at it. But it's very tied to career success factors. It's tied to the ability to lead others, to build powerful brands, and to navigate organizational politics. And so what we'd like to do is start out asking some questions of our esteemed panel. So this first question is for Debbie and Holly. Do you have any personal advice for the audience on how to improve communication skills to advance your career?
First of all, it's good to be here and good to see all of you. I think for me, the thing that I value most in communication and in leadership is authenticity. So I really think if someone is authentic and what they say is truthful or believable, that resonates in the message. And so I think in terms of advice, for me it would be, as you think about how you are communicating, be willing to share the difficult facts. Sometimes it's hard to say what you need to say, but it's important that you do, to be truthful and to maintain that authenticity or that believability about what you have to say.
Well, for me, the biggest thing is looking at communications strategically. And when I say, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Communicating. Yes. And when I say strategically, I mean, have a goal when you go into a communication. Be cognizant, you've studied the audience, you know what you want to get out of that communication. And then when you leave the communication, be very honest with yourself, whether you're kicking your behind around the parking lot because you didn't meet it or you did poorly, you learn from that. And to this day, I still do that. Or I have my business partner and best friend do it for me. She'll critique me. And you'll learn a lot, and each time you'll get better and better at it.
Great. Okay, this next question is for Martha and for Pam. How has your communication style changed as you've advanced in your career?
Go ahead, Martha. Well, I have learned to be brief.
Thanks, Martha.
But now that I have the mic, we really are bombarded with information. Everyone you talk to, everyone you're trying to communicate with professionally is getting thousands of messages a minute. And so it is very important that you are very clear in your message strategies and that you're as brief as possible. I talk with a lot of the people who hire our graduates, and I have heard time and time again from their employers that they said, look, yes, it's good that you teach them to do whatever it is they need to know how to do, but also teach them to boil down what they know into 6 paragraphs, easily digested by a busy CEO. And I think that's one of the key aspects of moving forward in your career is to know what you want to say, but be able to say it very briefly.
I agree. Whoops. Here, let me share with you. I do agree with her, and some other points that I'd like to mention, especially with the young people, something that I've talked to my daughter about and she shared with me as she is growing, and that is when you're communicating verbally, skip the ums and the likes and learn how to talk more professional with the clarity. And backing up, a good communicator should also be a good listener. So there are many times I walk into a room or a meeting and I say, listen, Pam, listen. And when I know I'm also going to be talking, not only am I listening, but I am prepared. I know the details. I am prepared. I will be brief, but to the point. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Bentina and Pam. It is often said that to be an effective communicator, one must know your audience. How do you prepare for communicating with a group when you have a definite end goal or game plan that you want to achieve?
Well, the first thing I think you do is you take the opportunity to make sure you really assess your audience and what it is exactly each of them is coming to the table with, what their goals are, what they would like to have, what their personality quirks are. If you've been working with them, so it's a setting where you've been around them a lot, you'll know that. But oftentimes we don't take the time to prepare that piece. We don't think about the people in the room and ask ourselves, what are they going to be afraid about? What are they going to be concerned about? What are they going to be thinking about as I move forward with this particular topic or request? And I like to remind people that, like Julie said in the question, it's all about your end game. And so it doesn't matter if you go into the room and you present the best presentation or make the best remarks that you can make if you haven't really thought about how it's going to resonate with the people you're talking to and how to make sure that ultimately what you want to achieve, you can achieve.
And going on what Bentina said is this: if you are the decision maker and you're talking to a group, know your audience, you don't always want to be the one with all the answers. You want to look at them and draw things out of them where you're getting the best of who they are and encourage them to talk to you and to share their ideas so that they come up with the right answer, so that they come up with the direction that you're going to go. Because then everybody is buying in, kind of a different from where she came from, but it's know the end game or know where you're trying to go. So that kind of comes from a leadership point to drawing people in to work with you and knowing your audience.
Great. Okay, Holly and Martha. Do you feel that the new advances in technology, like texting, email, Skype, have changed communication styles in professional settings?
It's changed tremendously. It's changed how I communicate, how my team members communicate, and how our company communicates. It's been the biggest change. So when we started business in 2005, it was email and conference calls. Now it's instant messaging is predominantly the method we use for communication, especially to folks in our other states that work with us. Texting, video teleconferencing so that we can have a connection with people who do not work here in our local office with us. It's changed everything about how we communicate, and it's also changed how we train people when they first come in the door, because there's specific types of communication you want documented and you want that in email. And it's teaching them to know the difference between a casual and a more professional communication.
And it's had a disastrous effect on standard language because we don't spell things the same way anymore. And I think also, and I'm a lot older because when I got started, if you wanted to send a message, you typed it. And if you wanted to send it to more than one person, you used carbon paper and typed 2. So things have changed. But also, one of the things that I've noticed, especially in this time of texting, is we get this information so quickly. We get it so very quickly, and then we have to process it. And so we're getting things in a linear way, whereas in the past we used to get it, more broadly, and it really is testing our information processing skills.
Hey, Julie, please don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call someone or walk next door to an office and interact with someone, because nothing can take the place of that one-on-one interaction that you get from developing relationships and really knowing why someone feels the way they do or how they react in their body language to that. And I think sometimes it gets just too easy to send the IM or to pop the text. In fact, very quickly, the worst day for me was when I left my daughter a voicemail message telling her how much I missed her and how much I loved her, and I couldn't wait till she got home. And she called me to say, "Hey, Mom, I hate retrieving voicemail messages, so will you just text me next time?" So, for me, understanding that is her form of communication, I have to respect that. But for her to understand that it's also important to interact with her mom, right?
Great comment. Pam and Bentina, how does your communication style change in a conflict or an environment of difficult negotiations?
I'm I'm a pretty direct person, but at the same time, I am a persuasive person. I don't believe that when you get in there in a negotiation or conflict that you really just stir the pot. I don't get into drama or gossip, and I don't want to bring that to the table. I really want to sit down, look at the details. Let's talk about your point, my point. Let's be persuasive and work together. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I try to stop a minute and regroup when I notice that the conversation is escalating. And that's hard because I'm a lawyer, so the argument or the debate, it's who I am, right? And it's fun to me, it's sport to me, in all honesty. But I have to recognize, back to my point about the end game, knowing my end game, it's not going to get me to where I am. I may leave that conversation feeling like that was a really good back and forth, and man, I scored some points. But ultimately, whatever it is we wanted to accomplish that day likely went unaccomplished. And something my father told me once, he said, people won't always remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so engaging in that sport makes them feel bad. So it's all about the long-term relationship as well as getting what I want to get done.
How long did it take you to learn that?
It took me a while on that point.
Okay, Debbie and Holly, does your personal communication style, does it change at different levels if you're interacting with peers, supervisors, if you're acting in a leadership role, if you're talking with customers?
So I'm going to go back to that first thing I said, which is authenticity. So I try not to change my communication style in terms of that. But Martha hit on something that's absolutely true. When I communicate with the CEO of our company, he doesn't want a lot of the flowering details of it. He just wants the bullet points. So I definitely am mindful of that. When I'm communicating with my leaders, and I want the opportunity not only to communicate, but to teach and train and develop them, my communication may be a combination of support, coach, support. So I think you have to be really mindful of who you're talking to, adjust to their communication style, and what you ultimately are looking to achieve from the communication.
I have to agree with Debbie 100%. My communication style changes every time for every audience. The authenticity piece always remains consistent. I do have to take a step back because, like Pam said, I'm also very direct, and I'll get right to the point, right out of the gate, and I'll have to step back, especially if it's an email, and look at it and look at my audience and say, okay, I need to put hope you're having a great morning, some sort of softener to it, because otherwise I will not get the result I want if I just blast them with here's what I'm looking for or what's needed. So it does have to change every time, and everyone here has stressed, know your audience. If you don't know the person, Google them. Try to find out as much as you can. Talk to somebody else that knows them so that you'll be very successful when you go to communicate with that person.
Martha and Bentina, can you discuss the impact or value of nonverbal communication in the workplace?
I'd say, along with knowing your audience, we all need to practice a little bit of knowing yourself. And I've worked with a lot of people who don't recognize the way their face looks. They don't have or haven't had the opportunity for someone to tell them how a certain behavior resonates or doesn't resonate with other people. And like Holly said, I often ask other people on my staff that I really, really trust to tell me how I come across, because my words may say one thing, but my body language may say another. So you've got to be completely aware of the whole package you're presenting, not just the words you're saying.
70% of our communication is nonverbal. And so it's very helpful to be able to read that. And some of our messages are as old as civilization itself. You know, we hold our arms up to show we're not armed, and we fold our arms sometime when we're not interested and sometimes when we're cold. So you do have to be able to distinguish those. But it is helpful to know the message you are sending, but also to be able to read those messages in the room. Especially as our world as our workplace is more diverse, these messages differ And we need to be able to learn to read those too. In some cultures, looking people directly in the eye is a good thing. It's good, honest business. In others, it's very disrespectful. We need to know that because we are working in a much more diverse and global environment. Also I think just, well, I even wrote myself a note about that because it was really, really good.
I write nice too.
I know, she's waving the flag back there too. Listen to what isn't said. We're all in conversations, we're all brainstorming, we're all coming up with a decision, and somebody doesn't say anything. They are shouting at you, just in a little different way.
Great point. Okay, Pam and Debbie, in your experience, does your personal communication style change if you're dealing with men versus women?
I'm killing the microphones here. Bentina, I thought that would be a pretty good one for you because you work in a man's environment. So Debbie and I are going to tackle this one. Working with men, I found that working with women, and at the clerk's office we have a lot more women than we have men, and we are softer with one another. Believe it or not, you would think we're combative. You're typically not combative with another woman. They're softer. You take time and explain the details. I have found my communication with men are shorter and direct, which I can do that very well, but I just have to make sure that I'm not offensive because I'm a woman. I had to act like that so that at least my direct communication is respected. So there, I think, can be a line there that you don't want to be too offensive when you're talking to a man by being direct.
I think I'm hilarious, and usually, usually the guys don't always catch that as much, I think. No, I would agree with Pam. I think really, it's, I do think you have to really be mindful about how you're communicating. So your body language, those other things, getting to the point. One tip I would give you all is when you are communicating, if you can start and think about your sequencing of your communication and lead with the why. Think about it. Oftentimes when we communicate, we want to talk about what we want and how we want to do it and why we want to do it. But if you have limited time and people understand why you want to do something, they're far more interested in what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So maybe you just might think about that.
Great. Bentina and Martha, how do you handle a situation where the communication of your idea is implemented by a higher ranking person in your organization who then takes credit for your idea?
Yeah, this was so. I told them when we were talking. When I first came to my current job, when I first got on the team, there were 3 women and 2 men, and the highest ranking person was a woman. So, and over the course of the 7 years I've been here, there are now 4 men and me. And it's changed, the whole dynamics of the group, the whole experience that I have where I give an idea and it falls flat, it's like I didn't say it, and I go, did I just say that? I kind of ask myself that, and I look around and someone else says it, and I go, that was it. That was my idea. And everybody goes, oh, that's great. And I thought, I just said that. Nobody hear me say that, right? So then I have to tell myself, get out of your conversation in your head because you're missing what's going on in the meeting. You'll have to deal with that later. But what I have found works for me, and that's just because I deal a lot in politics. That's what my area is that I will often go back later and compliment my peer on how he took my idea and made it better. or I've gone into my boss and say, isn't it really great that he listens to my ideas? I mean, and it's just kind of my way of making clear to everybody that I heard that. You didn't, but I did, and I'm not being petty. And, maybe if you think it through, you'll remember that it was my idea. But it's just my way of dealing with it. It feels good to me after I'm done, so it works.
Well, I'm usually pretty delighted that an idea, if it's a good one, gets implemented, and sometimes you get the credit and sometimes you don't. But, you know, I've got a lot of ideas, and so I don't worry too much if I'm getting the credit for all of it. And it's also very gratifying when you're in meetings, you're trying to solve some mutual problems, and all of a sudden you start hearing from strangers or people you didn't know things you just said at another meeting, and that means it was a good idea. It's getting circulated. People are capturing the thought, and so, that's teamwork, and that's what organizations are supposed to be doing, so I don't worry too much about it.
Okay, Debbie and Holly, in your opinion, is empathy in communication styles shown by a woman leader perceived as a strength or as a weakness?
So just so you know, this is kind of fun for us. We had breakfast one morning and we were chatting, and then Julie created these questions based on our conversation. So it's kind of fun. So this question really is centered around, I have some political background, ran and got elected to public office, and so this is my opinion. Bentina said this is her experience of things, and so this is my experience. In politics, I often had the experience that when men would display emotion about something, that the reaction was, isn't it wonderful how caring and thoughtful and concerned they are? But when a woman would do that, the reaction would be, she's not in control of her emotions, she's hormonal, all those other things. And I actually read a book from a woman governor on this subject. So I do think as women, we have to be mindful of that. Whether we want to believe or we are there today, I think there's still some people that perceive displays of emotion or empathy as a sign of weakness for a woman. So I think you can do that. You have to just be very controlled about how you do that and very aware of the way you're displaying that empathy.
I completely agree with everything that Debbie had said, and just from my personal experience, our company is IT consulting, so there's a lot of men. That's predominantly a men's field, though women need to get into it, and I'd love to help any woman get into it. But they don't expect emotion from me. I will not be respected as much if I show a great deal of emotion in business. Now, what's surprising is my business partner is very emotional, and she is the person that goes out and talks to customers and gets business. And I'm the one that's very even-keeled all the time. But when I get mad or angry at something somebody has done, that seems to set a wave in the office of everyone, oh my God, she's mad. And so I can't win either way. If they know I'm mad, then that sets a tone in the office that I don't want to have. But I think there is a place for emotion so that people know you're passionate about something. And that's something I struggle with because I'm very passionate, but I don't like to show a lot of emotion.
I'm going to ask one question of all the panelists, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So start working on writing your questions down. And if you'd like to direct it to a particular person, feel free to do that, or we can direct it for you. Okay, so starting with Bentina, this is the question. Has your communication style helped you advance in your career field?
Yes, it has. And it has a lot, I think, to do with the fact that as Judy mentioned, I tend to believe I belong wherever I am, sometimes even when I don't. And I think that helps convey a sense of confidence. And so there's not a sense that from other people, before I open my mouth, that I'm not going to believe whatever it is I'm getting ready to say. They know that I believe that. Additionally, my mother started me in Toastmasters when I was itty-bitty, quite honestly. And so I've been public speaking and very comfortable with speaking in front of audiences for a very long time. And that means that people know I have a level of comfort, and that helps with my confidence as well. And so by training, I've always had jobs that required me to speak a lot and to be able to address audiences or groups of people. And so it's been something that has worked well for me. And quite honestly, I think that my career choice was based on the fact that I've been comfortable with communications for a long time.
I was very shy growing up. I was just quiet. Might be hard to believe with some of you that I work with, but very quiet. I didn't think my opinion mattered. I didn't think I needed to speak up. In fact, if it was an oral report, I'll just skip it. What's the lowest grade other than getting an F? What's the basics here? But what I found out is I'm a pretty smart person. My opinion matters. I'm well read. My perspective matters. And I started talking more, and I started communicating. I started believing in myself. I started having confidence. And I will tell you, when I was on the campaign trail, I spoke up. I was passionate because I thought that I could make a difference. And I think that over time I grew in confidence, and then I did better as far as my communication skills by reading, listening, coming to seminars. But I think get confidence. Your opinion matters. You are important. Your perspective and whatever strong point you have is valuable. So do speak up.
I too was very shy until I found the career path that I was very passionate about. And once I found that, like Bentina and Pam said, I gained a lot of confidence. I would purposely put myself in situations where I had to speak publicly or with a small group of professionals in that field. And you do that enough, then it becomes second nature. So I encourage everyone to step outside of your comfort zone and go out there and speak publicly as often as possible.
So I think communication's an art and a science, and it's a combination of the two. And you asked the question, do I think I've had, success because of communication? And absolutely. I think communication is critical for anyone to be successful, whether it's written or verbal. And so don't be afraid to continue to develop your skills to be a good communicator. Invest the time. Take a course or role play with a friend, or, take the things that you're good at and maximize those as strengths, and take the things that you're not as good at and find a way to get better. And, if you're not comfortable with direct or crucial conversations, get some development on how to get better with that. And I think I've done that, and I think that's been helpful for me.
I was never shy.
Really?
And I would talk to anybody on the street at any time. I'm sure when I was 3 years old, and, hi, I'm Martha. What's your name? How old are you? I'm 4. How old's your dog? But I come from a family who loves to tell good stories. And my dad was especially good at visualizing things for us. And no matter what I came home with, whatever outlandish idea I might have had, he not only would encourage me and say that's a good idea, but he'd picture it for me. And he, for example, I think I was going to be a cowgirl one year, and then the next year I was going to be an opera singer. And I will say it's good for the cattle industry and the music industry that I didn't pursue either one. But he would say things like, that is a great idea. And someday when you're opening in the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, now that was a far cry from South Mississippi, he said, Mama and I are going to be there. We're going to be on the front row. I'm going to buy Mama a long dress. He'd paint it for me. And then the next week it was, something new. But I learned that when you're working with people, if you can help them make a story about what they want to do, it can really take you a long way.
Great answers. So questions. Anybody have questions? You can come up to the mic and ask a question, or you can write it on a piece of paper and we'll ask the panel. Brave, yay.
I don't think it's on, but can you hear me? question for you is, and I don't know if this is really a communication question, but more about your leadership as women in this community. You know, a lot of us are up and coming leaders, and sometimes we can get caught up in the hype or rising stars or whatever. And I was just wondering, how do you keep yourselves grounded in the midst of all of that?
Oh, I have to answer this. I just go home and they bring me right back to where I was. In a former life, or in two former lives, I was a university president. And, you know, I would come home at the end of the day and life would have caught me up and I would be all, you know, rowdy and gesturing and so forth. And my husband would sit there for about 3 minutes and listen to me. And then, you know, and then if I made one imperious statement, he would look at me and he would say, "You're not my president." So it helps if you have grounding at home.
Yeah, I want to echo what Martha said. I mean, I think I have a ground rod at my house in terms of my husband, because that's what he does, and he tries to do it in the best way possible if I should get ahead of myself or outside of myself or above myself or wherever it is I want to be. But I think the thing that's really important about that too is that I know that where it comes from is a place of love, and that's what it's about. It's about who I am when I walk in my house and how I have to exist in the world outside of vice president at Gulf Power. And having those people around you, whether or not it's a spouse or a child or a best friend, it's important no matter what level you're at or whatever you're doing, because we all can have times where we take ourselves just a little bit too seriously.
I think also how I feel about it is I'm no better than you. I'll do anything with you. I'll walk with you. I'll talk with you. I'll work on your paper. While I want to be a good leader and I'm passionate about my ideas, I'm still part of the team, and I've never forgotten that. And I too go home to 4 kids, and I got to forget what happened during the day because we've got a lot of other things, and somebody doesn't have something ironed, washed. What are we eating? Because that's all the boys ask is what's for dinner, what's for lunch, what's for breakfast. And I just have to forget that I'm the team of the family now. I'm with them and getting things done. So just don't take yourself too seriously, and remember, you're no better than anybody else.
Here, here. Exactly what everyone has just said. When I go home, there is no sympathy whatsoever. I do know I have to go home and iron shirts tonight, so it's just exactly like they said. I'm one of the team. Just like at work, if the bathrooms need to be cleaned, I will go clean the bathrooms. But I expect all my team members to do the same thing. So it's all for one, and that's the way it is.
So consistent messages. I mean, you know, remember to surround yourself by the people who love you and will tell you what you need to hear, not always just what you want to hear. Make sure that you remember that if you're not a part of a team, you know, you're not really advancing the ball. In fact, you're not a leader if you're not doing that. And then finally, you know, just take the time to remember the things that are really important to you. So if that's your faith, make time for your faith. If that's your family, make time for your family. If it's giving back in a community, don't get so wrapped up in moving your career that you forget to those whom much has been given, much is expected in return. You know, just sort of going back and centering on all those things, to me, is really how I would think of that.
Great answers. So this question that came from the floor, we're going to ask to the 2 admittedly shy women starting out. Okay, so that would be Holly and Pam. Okay, and the question is, for us introverted women that lack a desire to network, how do you suggest we build our network to further our careers, especially when more than 50% of people today get their current job positions through people they know?
I think volunteering is, this may be way off, but I think if you start getting involved in volunteering, or go play a sport, go play tennis, whatever you enjoy doing, but when you start networking with people and you start having different and more diverse conversations, you do start growing. It may not be that niche or science field that is what you like, but you'll learn other things about people, and you grow. Whether it's at your church volunteering or at the soup kitchen, you'll find that your communication and your growth on things when you're not on the job or at home really will change your life and your communication.
Absolutely. And also, to just add to what Pam has just said, when you walk into a room like this and there's lots of folks and it's intimidating and you're not the outgoing personality, when you go talk to somebody, I make it a mission. I don't want to talk about me. I want to hear about you. I want to find out what you like, what you do, where did you grow up. So I focus the conversation on whoever I'm talking to, and there was, when I was starting to try to get outside my comfort zone and do this, I would try to make sure I had 3 people that I spoke with in the room. And if I did not say one word about who I was and what I did, that was a success. I learned 3 new people and had 3 new friends.
I want to comment on something that she said because it's funny that you come up with the 3 people. I have a son that's 6'3", smart, good looking, but he was so painfully shy when he was little. We'd get out and we'd be in front of the school and I said, okay, buddy, tell 3 people hi. Just 3 people, tell 3 people hi. And then as we progressed the next year, it was, okay, ask 3 people one question. What'd you do last night? Something about them and not you. And even that little, he got a lot out of it. He's still pretty quiet. I don't think he's ever going to be out there and be a real heady kid, but he learned to get over that shyness, that introvert spirit that he has.
Great advice. Okay, we have a question from the floor.
Hi, my name is Nancy Johnson, and I'm actually a recent college graduate and newlywed. And my husband already has a very prominent career, and I'm still working on that for myself. So my question is, how do you reconcile the demands of being a mother and a wife with a demanding career, and what kind of sacrifices might I expect to make at home and at work?
Sleep. That's your sacrifice. Sleep.
So I have 2 girls, and today I'm going to leave and I'm going to drive to Gainesville to spend the weekend with my daughter because it's her birthday. And Pam and I were talking, I'm going to get there tonight at midnight, and we're going to have lunch tomorrow and dinner, and then I'm going to drive back. And so sometimes you just got to do it, right? You have to make time for the things that matter most to you. One quick story. When I made the decision to get out of public office, not to run for re-election, which was tough because I loved what I did, I didn't want to miss that time with my kids. So it was important for me to make that sacrifice. But when you make a sacrifice, it doesn't mean you can't still find a way to find meaning and a way to give back in your life. And sometimes when you think you're sacrificing, the reward that you will find in something else is far more rewarding. So don't be afraid sometimes to just do what your heart and your gut tells you is the right thing to do while you're making sacrifices for the things you love, because something else really wonderful will come along in the process.
Thank you.
I think also I'll add, you mentioned you and your husband each have a career. And sometimes that's a delicate balance. And I think what you do, and anyone that's been a part of theater or studied theater, sometimes you have to take turns taking the lead. Your careers are not going to progress at the same rate, and someone's going to get the big break and hit a plateau, and then the other big break is coming. And so it really does take, I think, a lot of communication and willingness to say, you're going to be out front right now, but when it's my turn, then I'm going to be out front.
And kind of very, very similar to that, but on a slightly different note, is that I always hear people talk about work-life balance. Like if there was some scale, there would be 50% on work and 50% on the rest of your life. And I've never existed in that universe. I don't know that anybody ever has. And I think we all have to be realistic that, like lots of things in your life, there are going to be times where you're giving more than you're getting. There are going to be times where you're focused on more aspects of your life than other aspects of your life. And it's all about figuring out ultimately what keeps you happy than it is about trying to make sure that those scales stay evenly balanced. Because the reality is that's not the way people's lives work. We're not going to live that 50-50 point.
In fact, we stopped calling it work-life balance. We call it work-life blend now. I mean, really, in our workplace, we say, call it work-life blend. There'll be times you can devote more to your personal life, but other times we may need more from you at work.
Okay, we're going to take a question from the floor. So I think I'll direct this question to Debbie and Bentina. Okay. How do you approach communicating with a coworker when you know the person is not going to be happy with what you need from them or what you're going to tell them?
You're the one that was in the meeting. The guy was taking all your ideas, Bentina. So.
It does go to the knowing your audience and figuring out what threatens people and what makes people feel uncomfortable. And when I know I'm going to have a very difficult conversation with someone, I try to sit down and plot that all through. So, and I do try to ask myself, what's your end game? Are you trying to get them to hear you? Are you trying to get them to change their behavior? Are you trying to get them to do something? I mean, what exactly is it that you want to happen on the other side? Do you just want to be heard? And if I can think that through and go into the room that way, I find that I have a much better result. And there are times where I go into the room and I didn't do that. And it often ends the way I'd expect. I get out later and I go, that was improper planning. You did not think that through. You did not process that. And you didn't act like you knew that other person in the room was not going to like what you said.
So 100% would agree with that. And the other thing, maybe something we don't think about, is where you're having that conversation. So, you know, whether you kind of confront someone abruptly or whether you're sitting down across the table, and whether you outline sort of what you want the expectations of that to be, you know, trying to remove or ease some anxiety. I think you can do some of that in the way you just really think ahead, to your point, Bentina, about that.
Okay, we'll take a question from the floor.
Hi, I'm Krista Childers. My question is to all you 6 beautiful, well-put-together women. How has your image impacted your career, and what advice can you give to the younger, aspiring generation coming up?
I don't have to answer because I'm the mom. You surprised me being up here. I'll let you go.
You know, I think, especially when we think about communication, everything about us communicates what we want to say. So, you know, Martha touched on it. Our nonverbals are important. Our physical appearance is important. You know, I think knowing what you're wearing based on what you're trying to do or portray is important. So when I'm trying to have a conversation, by the way, my daughter is friends with her, so you know her. So when I'm trying to talk with her, the cooler I can dress, the better it will go. So I'm mindful of that. No, I do think in all those situations, you know, I really encourage, particularly young women who are starting to work in our organization, to think about, is that skirt really what you want to wear to work today to send a message that you want to be a professional woman in this workplace? Is that blouse cut the way that it's cut, sending the image that you want? So I think you have to think about all of it. Nonverbal, what you say, and what you wear and how you look.
You know, I'd say that everything in life has a uniform. And I think that that's what we forget. And I laughed. There was a comedian that said, you know, if I mistake you for a stripper and you dress like one, I'm sorry. You know, so... But that's the reality, right? Everything in life has a uniform, and that uniform is across a variety of different settings. When I go out at Gulf Power to the power plant, I don't wear this. This isn't the right thing to wear there. So it's not just about whether or not it's too long or too short. It's just whether or not that particular place for that particular event with that particular audience, whether or not that's the right thing for you to wear. And I would say that image is one of those things. When you lose it, it takes a long time to get it back. When people put you in a box, they will never see or rarely see the times you were outside of that box. But the one time you step back into that box, it validates whatever it is they think about you. And so you just have to be careful that you're projecting the image and wearing the uniform for the occasion that presents itself.
Okay, this next question
Can I say
is-
something?
Yeah, sure.
I grew up with a mom in Las Vegas, Nevada that had a hair salon. She taught me 3 things every day: hair, lips, nails. And maybe it's a girl thing, but her point was always be finished in your work environment. So I just wanted to share that tip from Mom.
Okay, this question we're going to send to Debbie and Martha because it mentions Pam and it deals with working with women. So the question is, Pam mentioned that she is gentle with the women she works with, but many female leaders are not that way. Sometimes when they get in positions of power, whether it's in charge of a bake sale or as CEO of a company, they become bossy, aggressive, competitive towards other women. How do we deal with that?
That's a hard one. I need to turn it just a little bit. One of the things that I've noticed in my career, whatever I've done, I've been the first woman, whatever it was. I was the first woman dean and then the first woman president, all of that. And most of the time I was working with men. And one of the things I observed early on was that the guys pretty much treated me like the boss, like their guy boss. They didn't treat me differently. The women did. My women employees didn't, maybe because there weren't enough role models. They didn't quite know what to do with a female boss. And so it was really interesting for me to have to create the distance that there has to be between a supervisor and the people they supervise, a respectful distance, and that we're not all just girls, and we aren't all the same. And so it really is an interesting dynamic that we have to constantly watch, especially in the workplace. We have work to do, and it is our work that distinguishes us, not our gender.
So I was asked to answer this too. So again, my experience is very similar. Running for office, I found that it wasn't the men that were asking me questions that distinguished gender, it was the women. So it was the women who would say, well, how are you going to run for office and have a child at home, but my opponent's wife was pregnant at the same time we were running for office? So what's the message? The message is that I think we as women owe it to each other to be honest with each other and encouraging to each other so that we can all get further ahead with the things that we want. And so that means being more supportive and not letting our biases about certain things begin to weigh in. It can be honest about the things that we admire about each other in leadership and honest about the things we don't admire, and a willingness to have those tough conversations to say, are you aware? Or when you do this, I feel this way. And to just help each other get better as leaders and as women looking to sort of make our mark in either the companies or organizations that we're in.
Could I just add real quick to that many women that I've run across who act exactly like the person who wrote the question stated, it's because they feel like that's what they have to act like to be heard or to be respected. And that's, if you do what Debbie just said, you can help them to overcome that or to get past that.
Okay, this one I'm going to direct to Pam and Holly. How do you prepare yourself to go talk in front of a crowd?
Lots of preparation.
Has anybody ever talked to the mirror? I mean, everybody's doing selfies now. That way back when they say, go look in the mirror and talk to yourself. At some point in your career, hopefully early on, you really do need to look in the mirror so that you are comfortable in what you look like when you get up there. And also, pick the proper outfit. We were going to be sitting, so I thought, okay, I'm going to have sitting without a table, I'm going to have pants on. You really need to start off being comfortable. and again, being prepared.
Lots of preparation. As when I heard about this event and was asked to come, I looked at who's the audience that's going to come. It's UWF students. It's probably alumni as well. And what is of interest to them, and how is my background going to be of any benefit to anyone here? So it's just trying to shape the talking points so that it's of interest to the group.
And then Julie throws you curveballs, right? So, okay, this one's from Bentina. Okay. What do you do when your manager is not taking your personal development on the job seriously? You've asked for more training. You've asked for possible consideration for advancement because of your background in management, law, external relations. How do you handle that?
You know, my personal motto is that my development is my own responsibility. So I have to admit that I start from that particular vantage point. And I recognize that my boss has to be a part of that, but I've got to do whatever it takes. And I've had jobs that I've gone into where I've known nothing, absolutely, positively nothing about what it was going to take to be successful. And quite honestly, my boss didn't either. And so that meant that I had to design my own plan. I had to figure out who I needed to talk with, who I needed to network with. I just needed to make sure that I could get the experience I needed to be successful. And I'd say for all of us, you should start that way. If you are fortunate enough to have work for someone who can advise you, that's a good thing. But that's not your only resource. And finding other resources to help you be successful is important. And that also means finding other allies. I want to make sure that when they're sitting around the table, the people who are a level above me are sitting around the table talking about me, that the only person in that room that can talk about me, it's never a situation where my boss is the only person in that room that can talk about me. I never want it to be that way. I want the other people in that room to know me, to have met me, and hopefully to have had an experience with me that was extremely positive, so that they can ask the questions about why not Bentina. So he's not the one I have to rely on for my future and my success.
Okay, I'm going to direct this one to Debbie and Pam because of your work in legislative and governmental organizations. Has there ever been a situation when the other person in the communication recognized you as a woman and then changed their communication style? How did that make you feel, and how did you react to that?
I don't know that I've experienced that, and maybe that's because I'm a pretty direct person. I can talk to a man one-on-one. Maybe I'll let you talk about that, Debbie.
Well, you know, I was just sitting here wondering, have I ever thought that? Maybe, you know, I guess I just think people adapt to who they think they're talking to. I'm sure it's happened. I think I just ignored them. No.
Yeah.
I guess I did too.
I guess I've had the darling sugar honey stuff, which I don't think they would do with a guy, you know, but we live in the South, so most of the time I just keep moving through it. But, you know, why am I going to stop and pay attention to it? I don't have a need to. But that's the only thing I've ever noticed that a guy does different, is they throw in some little, you know, cute little moniker that's really irrelevant.
I think I ignored that too.
Yeah.
And I've had, you know, some of the same experiences, and certainly in my time I've run into, and I would say men of their generation, but of their generation. But I also have learned, and kind of back to nonverbals and proxemics, level the field. Especially, you know, if you're not, I used to think I was tall. I did, but I learned I'm not. And when I started seeing photographs. And, but you're standing, you know, me at, you know, I lie and say I'm 5'5", and a 6'2" man, it's hard, that conversation can be wrong. So I say, why don't we have a seat? And then all of a sudden, it is impressive how you can change the dynamic by changing just where, you know, you can level it, and by changing whether you're seated or standing or move around a little bit. So small thing, but it helps.
Just don't allow it, right? Just don't be intimidated by it. You know, be assertive in your own right, too, I think.
Okay, two of these questions are a little bit similar, so I'll open this up to whoever wants to take it. One is, have you ever had to reinvent yourself, and how did you do it? And the second one is, how did you find your passion, whether inside or outside of your career field?
I'll start off with that. So the reinventing. I started my career, I'm dating myself, back in the 80s selling pagers and cell phones. So if anybody knows what a pager is, it's something that really doesn't exist anymore. And that was to doctors' and attorneys' offices. They weren't as prolific everywhere as they are now. So yes, I now work with a great group of IT consultants, a lot smarter than me. But I had to reinvent myself several times over the years for expiring technologies that I was part of.
Maybe one more, and then we'll take one more question, and we'll finish up with one of these questions.
I wanted to be a CPA since I was in 7th grade, so I never had to reinvent myself. I'm doing what I love every day. So if you find your passion early on, keep going.
Good afternoon. I'm Brianna Snellgrove. I'm a former UDF student. I'm now a recent graduate, and I now work with Gulf Breeze News and Splash Magazine. And the question I have for you ladies today is, there's obviously very great opportunities to be a leader in our community as a woman, but during your process of becoming a leader, you've also had to learn how to manage people. So what is your recipe for success on managing people?
I wish my staff were here to answer that question. Well, first of all, for all of us to know, the number one reason that people leave a place they work is because of their boss, right? So every day when I interact with the people that work for me and with me, I'm mindful of that. So I always want to be rewarding and recognizing them for the things that they do well. And far too often, we just don't take time to tell people that we appreciate them and that we value them for what they are giving to us. So I think that's really important to me, just to really take the time to listen to them is another thing. You know, to be very thoughtful that I want to sit down at least on a monthly basis and I want to talk about the things we're working to move together. I want to be helpful to them. I want to be a part of what they need. I want to make sure they have everything they need to be successful in their role. And I want, again, we started off today, I said I love authentic leadership. I just want them to believe that what I tell them, they can see in what I do because I role model it as a leader every day. And that's what I strive to do.
I would just add, walk your talk. Don't ask what I don't give. I never expect more from people that I'm there earlier than they are, later than they are, doing more than I ever ask of my people, and it pays off.
The other thing is that oftentimes when you get to be in charge, when you get to be the boss, you believe that people are going to have to adapt to you. And that's the furthest from the truth. With each member on my team, they all hear me differently. They all want to be recognized differently. They all have different issues or problems or concerns. And I have to remember that as the leader, my responsibility is to get the best out of them. And that's not by making them come to me. It's by making myself or allowing myself to be with them wherever they are, however it is they need it. And you get lost in that sometimes. It's about kind of like knowing your audience. You get lost in who you are and your concerns, when really it's about them. Because as a good leader, I always want to ask myself, if I wasn't in charge, would they follow me? And they need to say, that needs to be yes. They would follow me regardless.
And a good panel ends on time. So we are going to end our session, but one of the questions was something we were prepared to talk about anyway. And the question was, what would you say is your top recommended reading material for improving communication skills and finding inspiration? And I had asked everyone on the panel to come up with one, and I'm going to tell you mine first. I had the privilege of being in Leadership Florida, and we had a speaker, James Hume, who was the speechwriter for 5 U.S. presidents. And he wrote a book called Speak Like Churchill and Stand Like Lincoln. 21 Powerful Secrets of History's Greatest Speakers. And I would highly recommend that book. And you don't have to write these all down because I believe Sherry has volunteered to email those to everybody that wants them if you give her your email address. So I'm going to ask Martha.
A book called Heroic Leadership. It's not one that you read in all the leadership classes, but it compares leadership to the development of the Jesuits and how they made things happen and built things in some pretty amazing ways. It's a great read.
So it's going to make the list because I work for Studer Group. Quint Studer's books are awesome. But I was mindful that I'm talking to a group of students here, and I want to share with you a book that I just recently read and loved, and it's called How Will You Measure Your Life? And it's written by a Harvard professor, and it was based on the fact that he ended his semester by constantly sharing with his students about, really thinking about, no one graduates from Harvard Law School thinking that one day they'll end up in prison, right? So at the end of the day, how will you measure your life? And I think it's just an awesome read.
My favorite book is Leading Change by John Cotter. I live by that book. I've read it at least 10 times over my career. It helps you to understand when you want to implement change or even go after something you want, how to go about doing it in a step-by-step manner.
I'm a Ken Follett reader. That is my favorite books to read. However, the book that was so fascinating in my career was probably 10 years ago when I read Hardwiring Excellence by Quint Studer. And I went to the city manager and said, can I teach this to all of City Hall? And he let me teach it to the leadership. I took about 9 weeks, and every week there was something in there, whether it's communication, direct verbal, or if it's writing thank you notes. I found that to be a broad spectrum of things that I needed to know to be a leader, and I was so passionate about it, I taught it to the other leaders in City Hall, and it's a great read.
The most recent book that I like a great deal is a book called The Secret Handshake. And ultimately, I believe that almost everything in life comes down to politics, whether or not it's the politics in your house or the politics of your workplace. And that book is about politics and how you can learn or should learn what the political environment is that you are in and how to navigate that environment properly.
Thank you all.
Great.